Thank you, farmers, for tuning in to yet another informative edition of your program. This is Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness in support of Vision 2030. This is where we discuss everything agriculture. We talk of production economics, business finance, time value of money, to mention but a few. Now, if you look at it, SDG 1 and 2 speak of poverty alleviation and eradication of hunger. Now, we are talking of becoming an upper middle class economy by year 2030, and one of the ways that we can do that is through agriculture. You would find that most of our Zimbabweans make a living out of agricultural ventures. They are taking their children to school through agriculture. They are maintaining their debts and even repaying their loans through agriculture, which is the case today. We are going to be looking at the vegetable industry here in Zimbabwe. And to discuss this and more, I have taken the liberty of inviting the Managing Director of AVANOS Seeds, Marietta. Marietta, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for being with us today.
Yes, as we get into our discussion, Marietta, you'd find that the reason why farmers tune into this program is because they want to learn. They want to understand, they want to be equipped with good production systems and economics for them, so that they understand at the end of the day they need to make a living out of their ventures. Now, we want us to talk about maybe a brief background of your organization. What is it? What do you do?
Right. So Avano Seeds is a vegetable seed company. So it exclusively works with vegetable seed. And we actually started about 20 years ago at the time when, there was a huge shift in the agricultural environment in Zimbabwe. It is my brainchild. So I started out trained as a plant breeder at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. And when I came to Zimbabwe, I recognized the need for improved seed that was actually developed locally for the benefit of the farmers and for, adapted to local environments. And that was the start of AVANOS Seeds. And then around that, I gathered a team of truly capable Zimbabweans who already knew the environment, who had all sorts of backgrounds in agriculture. So together we developed then this seed company that is exclusively Zimbabwean, proudly Zimbabwean, and that focuses on Zimbabwean farmers.
Thank you so much, Marietta. I should commend your efforts, given that you are coming with tailor-made solutions that are suitable to our climatic conditions, our environment, and even the people of Zimbabwe. Because 67% of our population makes a living out of agricultural ventures. We are headed towards the end of the marketing season, of the tobacco marketing season, and still our farmers need to have income. They need to generate income. Every fortnight he needs to be selling something so that he sustains his life. Now, moving forward, Marietta, can you maybe talk about what sets your brand apart, or the uniqueness of your production systems, or the uniqueness of your seeds? What do you put into them, the efforts that you align to ensure that the seeds that you produce are good and appropriate for our local farmers?
That's such an important point, and I think that is really where Avanos distinguishes itself in Zimbabwe, because our approach to supplying seeds in this country is that we start with research and development. So we initially, before we even introduce any product or any variety, is we look at what do farmers need in this country. And even if there are already existing crops, and we talk about commercial crops, for example, that are already considered good income earners to farmers, but we also look at what is not yet within that class, but could become one of those. Okay. So we've inherited a system in this country of certain crops that are already introduced, but the seed is always traded from other continents, coming from Europe or from Asia or from America, traded into this country. But those varieties that are developed by other seed companies are not necessarily the best for Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. So this is where we do things differently, and we essentially say, let's look at what are the local conditions. How do farmers farm in this country? And what do consumers need? We can't ever forget about the needs of the consumers either. Yes. So we then look at that and we say, okay, so we can see that we need to develop a product that is specifically now developed for the Zimbabwean farmers and for the Zimbabwean consumers. And I would like to highlight this, to illustrate this, maybe by one crop that I think just showcases, how this happens. Mm-hmm. So I'd like you to think back, let's say 20 years. A lot of our viewers might have been very young at that time, but yes, they might not so remember. But 20 years ago, the crop tsunga was not a commercial crop in
Yes.
this country.
Yes.
A lot of people would have a few plants in their backyard, you know, and they'd pick a few leaves, and sooner or later that crop would go to flower, that you couldn't do anything anymore. So tsunga was never considered something that a farmer could earn money with, simply because it just shot into flower too soon. You can't really get a good produce. We recognize that problem, and we also recognize the fact that, you know, tsunga is important in food supply and food security in this country. And so we took it on us to develop a variety that would produce a lot more vegetable before it would actually go into flower.
Okay.
And that is the variety that Bree brought into the market. Now, if you jump forward 20 years back to today, you actually see tsunga in your supermarkets. You see it in Mbare, we see it along the roadside, we see it everywhere. And most importantly, there are farmers out there that would actually plant a good amount of tsunga, a half a hectare, and they are making very good money.
Okay.
So now what we have effectively achieved with basically breeding a crop locally, adapting it to the local farmers, adapting it to the local market, the consumer market, we have created a whole new commodity in which, you know, farmers are making a lot of money, consumers can avail of this important vegetable, and we've broadened the availability of vegetable product in this country.
Okay, now Marietta, as we close in a snippet, we are running out of time for our first segment. Can you maybe highlight what do you mean, or what do agronomists or experts mean when they say good seed? You'd find that in our farming community, most farmers end up using returned seed from previous seasons or seasons prior to that one. Can we talk about good seed in a snippet as we round off?
Yes, absolutely. Good seed is the cornerstone of a good crop. Let's state that outright. Because without good seed, you cannot expect a good crop. And so a seed company's responsibility to the farmer, you know, the seed company has a responsibility to farmers. They will need to provide good seed. But indeed, what is good seed? So good seed is, first of all, it is you know, physically good seed. It needs to germinate, but good seed is beyond just germination.
Yes.
It needs to also be what we call pure, so it needs to carry the characteristics of the crop that you are going to grow. So you don't want a mix of cucumbers and melons and pumpkins. You want cucumber or pumpkin or melon or something like that. So it needs to be pure. But I think another very, very important characteristic of seed is that it needs to be disease-free. So it has to be produced and also treated in such a way that a farmer gets a problem-free product to start off his crop. And then finally, seed quality is also characteristic by genetic quality, meaning to say they are varieties. And as we will later on see in the field here, there's cabbage and there's cabbage, you know,
Okay.
there's different kinds of cabbage.
Okay.
So good seed also means that it is genetically to the highest possible standards that a farmer needs, and so that he can make his variety choices that suit his requirements in the field.
Thank you so much, Marietta. It was a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you so much.
There you heard it, viewers. We're talking of good seed, the importance of acquiring or investing in getting good seed for your agricultural enterprises, aligning it with vegetables. We are talking of the horticultural recovery plan here in Zimbabwe, and you should take heed of advice from our experts here telling us what to do and not what to do in our agricultural fraternity. On that note, we are going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the second segment. Stay tuned. Thank you, Zimbabwe, for staying tuned to Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness in support of Vision 2030, where we discuss everything agriculture. Now, in line with the Horticultural Recovery Plan that is being emphasized on by our Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Road Development here in Zimbabwe, we are going to be looking at cabbage's production. I should say that from what the experts here were telling me, it can grow up to between 5 kilograms to 7 kilograms. It's very heavy, and if you can excuse me, I need to put it down now. Now, viewers, we encourage you to be a part of these conversations. Feel free to get in touch with the producer, Wadzanai Manyore. It's on 0772 807 506. Alternatively, you can like our Facebook page, Agribusiness with Wadzanai. Make a follow-up on this episode and more, and leave your comments and suggestions. They are very important to us. It's Agribusiness with Wanzanai. We are also now available on Twitter, where most of these discussions and updates take place. It's at Agribusiness 110. Now, earlier on, before into the break, I was joined by the MD of AVANOS Seeds, Marietta, who was taking us through the brief background and history of how they produce their vegetable seeds for our local farmers here in Zimbabwe. At this point in time, I am joined by Socrates. He's also an agronomist working with AVANOS Seeds. Socrates, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Wanzanai. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yes, as we get into our discussion, can we talk about cabbages? What are the varieties that are available that our farmers here in Zimbabwe can take advantage of? You know that if you look at SDG number 13,
Yes.
it speaks of climate change. The emphasis is great on that. We are running out of water, and sometimes we also have incessant rainfalls that affect cabbages. Can we talk about the varieties that you are producing for the advantage of our local farmers?
Okay, so as AVANOS Seeds, we have well-adapted hybrid cabbages that perform well under Zimbabwean conditions. So we have three main hybrid cabbages. The first one being Athena Plus. This is a variety that matures as early as 65 days from transplanting. We also have a medium-sized cabbage called Gemma Plus. This one matures in the range between 75 to 85 days, and it gives you a large frame. It's actually the one that you have put down here.
Okay.
And then lastly, we have a late maturing cabbage variety called Indica Plus. This is for the farmers that really want the extra large cabbages, because this one can actually weigh as much as 6 kgs, as much as 7 kgs going forwards. So this is a very extra large cabbage variety that we have.
Okay, thank you so much. As we move right along, I would like us to talk about the rainfall patterns in our country. You'd find that in some periods where we're expecting rain, we don't have it. And then we have periods of incessant rainfalls. We also have periods of wet spells. And there are cabbage farmers out there who need to survive. At the end of the day, they are doing it for viability, for
Yes.
profitability. They need to get their return per dollar invested. Can you talk about what do they need to do in cases of heavy rainfalls, or even the varieties that you have highlighted that might work to their advantage in cases of heavy rainfalls?
Yeah, so the conditions that you have mentioned are associated with summer production of cabbage. Cabbage historically is a cool weather crop, but through developing hybrids like we have done here at AVANOS Seeds, we can now supply farmers with varieties that they can grow throughout the year in most horticultural regions of the country. Now, anything that's going to be harvested in summer is going to face extremes, whether in heat and also in rainfall. The current crop that we have here, we have Athena, Gemma and Indica, and we have grown these crops throughout the peak of the rain period. The Athena was transplanted on the 19th of January. We were getting a lot of the rains, and now it has matured. Today is the 24th of March, which means it has gone a little bit past the harvest period of 65 days. So what farmers need to understand is that when you are growing cabbages in summer, especially in Zimbabwe, you have to get a few things right. What you need to understand is that you need to get your land preparation right, and land preparation starts with site selection. So you have to choose a site that's suitable for production, a site that encourages drainage, a site that might have a bit of a slope, so that when we get that excessive rainfall, that water then flows out of your field and doesn't really, leave your cabbages susceptible to waterlogging or diseases that are related to excessive moisture. Secondly, we need to focus on our tillage, and the tillage should focus on the root depth, and it should also focus on the texture of the soil. So when we're carrying out our tillage practices, we really need to make sure that should you have a compact soil, you break that compaction and you really supply the root with a soil that promotes root growth and proliferation as well as drainage. And then you also need to look at your soil analysis, because that then allows you to make serious amendments that can then help you to produce your cabbages successfully in the rain. And then lastly, when you're producing in the rain, you may have to consider planting your cabbages on raised beds rather than on somewhere that's flat, because a flat land, normally it's easy for water to accumulate and you get saturated conditions. But when you raise beds, what you've done, you've increased the root depth, you've increased the drainage, and then you have really left your cabbages in an environment that really makes sure that they perform well in the wet season. And then in the dry season, it's important to just highlight this, because our summer is again associated with heat and rain. During the heat, my message to farmers is, if you can't irrigate it, don't plant it. It's very important that farmers invest in proper irrigation infrastructure and ensure that they really carry out capacity tests to see that their irrigation sources can support them during the dry spells.
Okay, now as we round off, finally we are getting to the end of this second segment. You've highlighted that you do also offer technical support. In terms of your technical support and your advice to our Zimbabwean farmers, can you maybe highlight? I understand that earlier on you did touch briefly on advice. Can you carry from there as we close?
Okay, so we offer agronomic services pertaining to our cabbage varieties. So this is like the growth, how you grow your cabbages. So we really focus on things to do with the general good agronomic practices. We also touch on the integrated pest management. Why we do this, we want the farmers to succeed. At the same time, we value the consumer, because what's happening now is that there's been an over-reliance on chemical control of pests and diseases, whereas you can use a more integrated approach that brings in your biological control, your cultural control practices, your physical control practices. What's very important is that the farmer needs to realize that the farmer's foot fattens the cow. If you want to make cash with horticulture, you really need to be on the ground scouting your crop. Scouting is an exercise whereby you go through your field, you check regularly for pests and diseases, and then you take corrective measures. Then I'd like to stress out the importance of carrying out soil analysis. So if you want to have a beautiful crop like we have here, if you really want to make good money, then you should really invest in soil analysis. I'm sure that if you're digging for gold, you wouldn't really do that without carrying a survey. So why plant without carrying out a soil analysis? Soil analysis will tell you information pertaining to your chemical properties. It will tell you information pertaining to the physical properties, and then you use your fertilizers accordingly, according to a soil analysis results and recommendations report.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you, Wanzana. It was a pleasure for me too.
We're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the third and final segment. Stay tuned. Thank you, Zimbabwe, for remaining tuned to Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness in support of Vision 2030. We are now here in the third and final segment of your program. We are looking at the vegetable basket. At this point in time, I've taken the liberty of inviting Gary. He is the senior agronomist with Avanos. We are standing in here, a field of Kovo Rugare, and I know most of you are excited to see Kovo on your television sets. Gary, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
As we get into our discussion, most of our Zimbabwean farmers might not know that Kovo comes in different varieties. Can you maybe highlight or enlighten us on the varieties of Kovo?
Okay, our Kovo Rugare is actually a hybrid Kovo. And it's grown from seed, not the traditional sucker root. And if you look at the plant, you'll notice that the leaves are very much larger than the traditional Kovos that farmers grow. Not only that, but the leaves are more tender and less fibrous than the traditional Kovo. And the cooking time for the consumer is very much less. So we're saving power and reducing pressure elsewhere on Zesa to feed our family. So what we proudly developed is a hybrid Kovo where we can reap up to 30 leaves on a plant. Normally an Mbari bundle, if you're talking about a commercial crop, would have in the region of about 250 traditional Kovo leaves, and they would sell that for about $4, right? With our Kovo, because the leaves are so much bigger, we can do it with maybe 120 leaves. We'll make an Mbari bundle being $4. When you consider that we plant at 33,000 plants a hectare, it's nearly 80 to $1 per plant that you can get. And so it can be a very profitable farm, crop for the farmer. One particular characteristic of this that's very important for the farmer is we must not overpick. So we always leave a cluster of leaves, because that's the factory for the lower leaves to grow out of. traditional cobble you carry on growing. This we need to leave the factory on top, and it's a very successful variety in the wheat. It's a variety that is tested resistance against diamond-back spot. Although you still have to say it's not immune, but it's highly resistant to most pests. The way it grows open, it's good against diseases. It's good against pests because most pests like to hide it underneath things, but this is a very open growth habit plant. So it's one of the easier crops for the farmers to grow.
Okay, thank you so much, Gary. That was very detailed. I like that you allude the fact that already you've been harvesting from the bottom leaves and now we are headed towards the top. And you're telling us that as farmers, it's different from our traditional cover whereby you can strip it down. But with this one, you have to be tactful when it comes to harvesting and reaping. Thank you so much for that. As we round off this discussion, Gary, we are headed towards the onion production season. If you look at our vegetable calendar here in Zimbabwe, we are headed towards establishment of onions. Can you talk about the varieties that might be available for our local Zimbabwean farmers? What are they, their qualities, their advantages as they are taking notes?
Well, Waz, unfortunately, Zimbabwe is too reliant on imported onions. So a lot of our farmers who grow onions can't afford the imports, and so they grow imported varieties that are not suited to good storage and good holdability and small necks and dark skins. So our onion production system in this country as it stands now is primarily a green bunch onion market. And then when they haven't sold the green bunch, they cut off the top and they try and sell it as a dry onion. And then the wholesalers say, imported onions will pay you, example, $7. Local onions, that's what we're growing proper dry onions. But at Avanos now we have bred local varieties, two varieties in particular. One is Kalunga and one is Ilanga. These have been bred with the characteristics that we need our onions to be. They've got fine necks, they've got round shape, they've got dark skins, and they are very field resistant to the challenges of disease that we have. So between the two varieties, we have a variety that you can do early onions for green bunch, you can do early onions for dry onions, and you can do, if you find yourself late in the season, you can have a variety that you can plant slightly later in the season and it will mature very quickly, and you can put that into storage and we can once again produce onions for our country year round.
Okay, thank you so much, Gary. That was very detailed. I would like to believe our farmers were taking heed to this advice. We are no longer producing onions and varieties that are possible for drying. We are limited to the green onions, which is not good for our import bill. We end up importing onions, and yet we do have the conducive environment to produce onions locally. We do have experts in the form of Gary. He was telling us it is very possible to be viable and profitable, even in kovu production. He was telling us maybe a bundle of this rugare kovu, this variety, you can have maybe 200 leaves going for $4, and imagine on your patch or on your hectare you have 33,000 plants. How much would that be? You can take your kids to school, you can pay your medical bills, and still be able to maintain a good lifestyle. From me, your host was Danai Manyore. I'm also on Instagram. It's a W Manyore, and the crew behind the scenes. Have yourselves a fabulous evening. Thank you for watching.